my daughter-in-law said. You don't do anything, you take care of my children while I travel. She never expected my change. When I retired at 66 years old, all I wanted was peace, my plants, and the right to live my days in silence without demands. But my daughter-in-law, with her usual coldness, decided that I should take care of her children, without warning, without dialogue, without any respect. I thought it would be something temporary, a family favor. But what I found was much deeper. Disrespect, manipulation, and a cruel attempt to erase me from the very family I helped build. But what she didn't expect was the strength I would discover within myself. Today, my story is about resilience, emotional courage, and the power that exists in not remaining silent in the face of injustice, even when it comes from those who should protect, not hurt. I'm happy you're here. Follow my story to the end and comment from which city you are watching, so I can feel the reach of this truth that for so long remained hidden. I was in the garden, among the begonias and lavenders, when the phone rang. Brooke's voice was dry as always, but there was something urgent in her tone. I'm leaving the children with you for a while. Indefinitely. I was paralyzed. I tried to understand, to ask why, to know where she was, but she didn't listen to me. She cut the call, saying it was a decided matter and that I should cooperate. I stood there, my hand trembling, facing a future I hadn't planned. Her voice echoed in my head. You're a grandmother. It's the least you can do. I argued, asked for at least a warning, a conversation with Michael, anything. But I was ignored with a coldness that was familiar to me. Brooke never gave me space. She always used me as a functional piece in her controlled life. And now she was throwing an immense responsibility at me as if it were natural. I felt the ground give way. I who wanted silence, peacetime, and suddenly chaos. Called Michael, but it went to voicemail. I tried a second time, nothing. It was as if fate had chosen that moment to test me. I sat on the living room sofa, surrounded by cushions I had embroidered myself with calm and care. The calm I was about to lose. I thought about fleeing, disappearing, but that wouldn't be my style. I would face it as I always had. But something inside me screamed. This time it wouldn't be her way. In 4 hours they'll be here. The sound of the doorbell sent a chill down my spine. I opened the door and there they were. Aiden with headphones, Chloe with her eyes fixed on her cell phone, and little Leo with a tablet in his hands. None of them looked me in the eye. None said hello. They just walked past me as if I were invisible. I closed the door slowly, observing every movement. The silence was uncomfortable, not because of the sound itself, but because of the absence of connection. Because of the indifference. Instinctively, I tried to start a conversation, but I received only murmurs or short answers. Chloe would sigh every time I asked something. Leo barely took his eyes off the game. Aiden seemed oblivious to the world. It was as if they weren't here by choice, but rather exiled. I watched the environment transform into a cold, impersonal force field. The house, once alive with the smell of coffee and the sound of birds, now echoed emptiness. I decided not to intervene immediately. I needed to observe, to understand the pattern. Their every gesture seemed programmed. They would get up to eat and then return to their devices. Not even among themselves was there any affectionate exchange. As if everyone was anesthetized, the living room became an island of screens. I went to the kitchen to prepare some tea, trying to organize my mind. I needed a strategy. This wasn't a simple visit, it was a silent invasion. And more than that, it was a deliberate emotional disconnection. Something was deeply wrong. I knew how to recognize an absence of affection, and this was more than absence. It was denial. Brooke had done a complete job of distancing them. Their eyes were dim, as if they didn't want or couldn't trust anyone. I took a deep breath. I wouldn't be another pawn in her game. Not this time. These children are programmed. I called Carol immediately. I need your help. Recorders, hidden cameras, everything you can get. I can't trust words. Carol didn't question. She had always known the nuances of my relationship with Brooke. We arranged to meet that night. I hung up the phone with a pounding heart, but feeling a spark of control return. I was no longer at her mercy. I was reacting. While the children slept, I installed small devices in strategic corners. Living room, kitchen, entrance to the house. Nothing intrusive, but enough to record. I needed proof, context, protection. They didn't know and I wouldn't tell them. Every gesture, every word, every reaction would be part of my puzzle. No longer a passive grandmother. Now a woman who knew the value of being prepared. I noted times, habits, reactions. Their every step would be observed. And not out of distrust of the children, but out of complete distrust of the woman who raised them. Brooke had always manipulated masterfully, but I had also learned to recognize the mechanisms. She trained them to reject affection, to avoid attachment. But there are things no screen can erase. There are truths that resist time. I decided that my house would have rules, even if that made me the temporary villain. So be it. Because being feared today would be better than seeing them destroyed tomorrow. I didn't want control. I wanted rescue. And if this war began without my consent, at least now I knew I wouldn't be defeated in silence. Nor with complacency. Enough of being silent. If it's war she wants, war she'll get. The next morning before they woke up, I unplugged the router and collected all their devices. Cell phones, tablets, headphones, portable game console. I put everything in a locked box in the hallway closet. When Aiden noticed, he screamed. Chloe came right after, furious. Leo whined. Chaos erupted in seconds. But I remained firm, holding my cup of tea like a shield. I explained that from that day on they would have routines. Breakfast together. Simple household chores. Times for reading, screen-free games, walking in the garden. They protested, calling it a prison. Chloe looked at me with anger. Aiden tried to intimidate me with silence. Leo kicked a chair. But I didn't give in. For the first time I set clear boundaries. And I endured the emotional storm that came with it. The house seemed like an emotional battlefield. But I knew I was planting seeds. Beneath the anger there was confusion. Beneath the shouting, a need for affection. They were addicted to escape, to distraction. And I now was the mirror forcing them to look at themselves. I didn't want to punish them. I wanted to reconnect them with the real world. With truth, with bonds, with affection, even if they hated me for it at first. At lunchtime no one spoke to me. They sat, ate, left. But I noticed glances. They noticed my firmness. They were starting to understand that here they wouldn't have the same freedom they had with their mother. And that didn't mean abandonment, it meant care. Being firm was, at that moment, the greatest act of love I could offer. Even if they didn't understand. You are not our mother. Hours later I heard a sound coming from the bedroom. Chloe had reconnected her phone via mobile data and accidentally posted an old image on Instagram. I didn't say anything. I just approached when I saw the screen's glow. It was a photo in Miami taken months before. In the corner, half-cropped, a man I didn't recognize. Chloe, caught off guard, tried to delete it. But it was too late. She realized I had seen it. It's just an old photo, she murmured. But her eyes betrayed her shock. I feigned disinterest, but I silently took a screenshot of the image. The caption was neutral, but the location and company said a lot. That man wasn't Michael. And there was no reason for her to hide an innocent memory, unless it was something Brooke didn't want me to see. I went back to the living room and sat down, my heart pounding. My instinct told me that image was more than it seemed. It was a piece off the board, an error in a manipulated narrative. And that gave me an advantage. For the first time, Brooke wasn't in total control. And Chloe, unknowingly, had given me a glimpse of the truth. A door I wouldn't hesitate to open. The photo showed more than people. It showed context. Brooke said she was alone, overwhelmed, abandoned by her husband. But there she was, smiling next to an unknown man, in a luxurious place. The contrast with the story she told was striking. And this needed to be documented before it was too late. I couldn't miss this chance. Who is this man? I printed the image immediately. I noted the post date, location, time. I wrote everything down in a new notebook which would become my dossier. I called Carol and arranged to meet her that night. I needed to cross-reference data, identify that man. All with caution. Nothing could be said to the children yet. What I had in hand could become evidence, but only if handled carefully. I went back to reviewing the videos and audios I had already recorded. I added notes, behaviors, phrases they said during moments of tension. Every day, I built an emotional and factual map. Their pain needed to be protected. And the truth recorded. Carol would help me with facial recognition and data cross-referencing. She knew people who knew where to look. I felt a strange relief as I put together the beginning of the dossier. It was as if I finally had something concrete. A thorn in Brooke's side. It wasn't just about intuition anymore. Now I had dates, images, signs. I couldn't stop her from trying to defend herself later, but I could ensure that, when the confrontation came, I would have a way to prove every step. It was an invisible war, but a real one. And the most powerful weapon I had was the truth. The children were at the center of it all, but they couldn't continue to be shields or hostages. I wouldn't allow it. For the first time she slipped. And that mistake would be the turning point. I just needed to stay firm, strategic, lucid. She just gave me the first piece of evidence herself. The third day began with a tension I could already feel in the air. Without devices, without digital escape, they were on edge. All it took was my suggestion that they help tidy the kitchen for Aiden to explode. Chloe threw a glass at the wall. Leo screamed until he lost his breath. In seconds, the living room became a battlefield. I took a deep breath, turned on the recorders, and just observed. I stood by the bookshelf, firm, my hands clasped. They kicked cushions, tore books, threw toys on the floor. I knew it wasn't personal. It was repressed pain, emotional confusion, the anger of a system in which they were trained to survive, not to live. My heart ached, but my mind remained cold. I needed to record everything clearly, without reacting in anger. The house seemed to crumble around me, but I maintained my focus. Every word spoken, every scream, every insult. Everything needed to be documented. I knew that one day these records would be evidence, not against them but against whoever put them in this state. When the chaos ceased, I sat on the destroyed sofa and waited for silence to finally fall. They were exhausted. And so was I. Even tired, I didn't fail to look at each of them. They were huddled, frustrated, sweating. They didn't know what to do now. For the first time, there was no easy answer, no automatic distraction. Just the emptiness of their raw emotions. I knew. This was the pain of rupture. Of a new beginning. Of truth invading. And even though it hurt, it was necessary. This will hurt them more than me. I started picking up the shards from the floor. I found old crumpled photos, toys that were once loved and now lay broken. Pieces of a childhood that still resisted. Each item was silent proof that, at some point, there was connection. Love. Joy. Brooke could try to erase it, but the past left traces. The children didn't remember, but I did. And I would keep it carefully. In the dresser drawer, I found a drawing by Leo, poorly scribbled, but with recognizable strokes. It was an image of a tree, a house, 3 people. Me, him, and a son. I knelt beside the paper, holding it carefully. He must have done it on another visit, before Brooke started planting rejection. My heart tightened. Tears came but didn't fall. I needed to be strong. Aiden rushed past me, as if he didn't want to see what I was holding. Chloe pretended not to look, but her eyes trembled. They were confused. Their anger was beginning to give way to doubt. And doubt was the first step. I didn't say anything. I just kept cleaning, showing with actions what words couldn't convey. That's how love began to break through the blockade. In silence. I collected everything and carefully put it away. I attached the objects to the already catalogued records. Every fragment of affection was a piece in the puzzle I was assembling. I wasn't just fighting against Brooke. I was fighting against oblivion. Against the narrative that said there was never love. But there was. And there still could be. I believed that with all my might. Why would she keep this if she didn't love? When the doorbell rang, my entire body froze. I checked the camera and recognized the badge, Child Protective Services. Lauren. I took a deep breath and opened the door with a contained smile. She seemed professional, but there was a discreet gentleness in her gaze. I introduced myself and invited her in. She crossed the threshold with firm steps and began to look around, attentive to details. I showed her the living room, still with signs of destruction. She didn't seem surprised. She just took notes in her pad. She said it was a routine visit by protocol. Her presence at that moment was a blessing in disguise. I was ready. I handed her a folder with reports, images, recordings. I explained the situation clearly, without victimhood. She listened in silence with raised eyebrows. Lauren walked through the rooms, observing everything. Tidy bedrooms, food in the fridge, routine schedules noted. She asked about the parents. I told her about Brooke's abrupt phone call and Michael's silence. She sighed. She wrote a few more things and asked to speak with the children separately. I agreed, even with a heavy heart. I knew that moment could change everything. I didn't know what she would see or hear. But I trusted what I had built so far. Every gesture, every record, every attitude thoughtfully chosen with love and firmness. I had prepared myself. Now it was up to her. Lauren returned to the door, looked at me, and smiled discreetly. We were just at the beginning, but I knew how to recognize a look of surprise in the face of truth. Come in, please. You've arrived at a good time. Lauren walked through the house calmly, as if listening to the environment. She observed details that seemed trivial. Photos on the shelf, folded dish towels, toys organized in boxes. She asked to see the backyard, the bedrooms, the bathroom. In each space, her clinical gaze seemed to weigh the emotional atmosphere more than the cleanliness. She knew what she was looking for, invisible signs. The children were silent. Chloe avoided eye contact. Aiden crossed his arms and Leo stayed near the window, as if wanting to escape. Lauren made notes but didn't comment immediately. I handed her another folder with copies of the recordings, dates, and notes from the past few days. I included the Miami photo, carefully printed and marked with a caption and date. Lauren sat at the table and began to flip through everything carefully. I saw her expression change. She was no longer just a professional fulfilling a routine. She was someone facing something unexpected. I didn't expect to find this, she said. Her voice was neutral, but her gaze conveyed empathy. She understood that there was more than appearance in that house. There was pain, and an attempt at healing. I remained silent. What I needed to prove was not my ability to be a grandmother. It was the truth about what these children were experiencing. Lauren saw beyond the mess. She saw the rebuilding, and that gave me hope. For the first time, an outsider validated what I had been silently screaming. That I am not crazy, nor exaggerated. I didn't expect to find this. Lauren asked to speak with Chloe privately. I stayed in the kitchen, hearing only muffled sounds. Time seemed to freeze. I wondered if she would tell the truth, if she would reveal something, or if, out of fear of her mother, she would remain silent. When Lauren returned, she was more serious. She thanked me for my trust and made additional notes. I excused myself and asked, "Did she say anything?" Lauren hesitated, as if weighing what she could or couldn't say. Then she replied softly, "She's confused. But she mentioned that she doesn't like it when her mother screams. She said it's strange here, but calm." My heart tightened. Chloe was feeling. She was allowing herself to feel. That was all I could hope for at that moment. First step. She asked me if she could trust me, Lauren added. That broke me inside. That was it. The core. These children no longer knew whom to trust. They had been taught to fear true affection. I remained silent, respecting the boundary between listening and protecting. Lauren wrote a few more things and said she would talk to everyone again soon. Aiden and Leo still seemed distant, but not aggressive. Chloe gave me a quick glance before going up to her room. I saw guilt, doubt, perhaps a thread of hope. Lauren said goodbye, saying she would have more questions, but for now she had what she needed. The late afternoon breeze entered through the open door. It was as if the house breathed a sigh of relief. "Can I trust you?" Before leaving, Lauren called me aside. "When Brooke returns, we will open a formal investigation," she said firmly. "But I want to make something clear, what you are doing here. It matters." I felt my eyes sting, but I held firm. The fight was just beginning. But now I was no longer alone. And that changed everything. She praised my organization, the care for the children, and the clarity with which I had documented everything. She said she rarely saw anyone so emotionally prepared to face a case like this. I thanked her, but I knew it wasn't about preparation. It was about love. A love that for so long had been ignored but now had a voice. Lauren promised to keep in touch and asked me to note any new behavior from the children. Everything can become evidence, even the small reactions. I agreed. Every tear, every phrase, every silence. Everything was important now. I said goodbye with gratitude, feeling that finally someone believed in me. And not by words but by evidence. I closed the door carefully. The house was at peace, at least for now. I walked to the hallway where the sun streamed through the cracks. Outside, I heard the first sounds of late afternoon. Inside me, a timid relief. Because now more than ever I knew, I wasn't facing this alone. You are not alone. When Michael finally appeared, my heart beat like a drum. I called him to the living room, sat facing him, and handed him the folder with everything I had gathered. The photo of Chloe in Miami with the stranger, the videos of the outburst, the torn drawings, the reports. I didn't let emotion take over. I was objective, like a teacher explaining something serious to a student she loves. He leafed through the pages in silence, but his eyes filled with astonishment with each new piece of evidence. I also showed him the audios, the children's loose words, their reactions to the electronics ban, their emotional withdrawal. Look at them, Michael, I asked. They are not well. But it's not because of me. It's because of everything they've been through. He stood up, walked to the window, and stood with his back to me. Silence. Long, heavy, cutting. When he finally turned around, his eyes were tearful. All this was already happening? He sat down again, elbows on his knees, head in his hands. How didn't I see? How did I let it get to this point? His words came out softly, as if too painful to be spoken aloud. I tried not to touch him, to respect his time. But seeing my son, that man so rigid and pragmatic, finally breaking through the wall, was like a ray of sunshine after weeks of clouds. He was waking up. Michael looked at me as if he were seeing me for the first time in years. Forgive me, Mom, for letting her do this to you. To them. To me. Before I could answer, he stood up, called the children, and hugged them tightly. Chloe hesitated, Aiden tensed, but Leo threw himself into his arms. And there, in that human huddle in the middle of the living room, I felt a crack open in the ice. All this was already happening? After that hug, he cried like a child. For the pain, for the guilt, for the lost time. I approached and touched his shoulder. There's still time, Michael. But it will require courage. He nodded, his eyes still red. We went to the kitchen, I made tea, and there we outlined the beginning of the plan. For the first time he wanted to act, not to flee, not to justify, but to do what was right. Michael looked at me with determination. I will no longer allow her to destroy them. Or you. His voice still trembled, but there was strength in it. He picked up his cell phone and wrote a message to Carol, asking for help with documents and contacts. Aiden from the hallway observed everything. Chloe feigned disinterest, but I heard her sigh in relief. Leo drew in peace. The atmosphere was changing. I sat with Michael in the living room and presented the Respect Project. It wasn't just about routine, it was about rebuilding. Child psychologists, group activities, family chores. His participation without interruptions. Real presence. They need to see you as a reference, not as a shadow. He listened carefully. He agreed. He was willing to start over, as a father, as a son, as a man. We knew Brooke wouldn't stay silent, that she would react. But now there were two of us, and the truth was on our side. It's going to be difficult, he said. It's going to be fair, I corrected. For the first time, Michael smiled sincerely. A small but genuine smile. I raised my teacup as an informal toast. Welcome back. And he responded with firmness. I was blind. But never again. That same night, Carol came with new folders and a printed calendar. We planned week by week. We were preparing for whatever came. The children were asleep. The house was breathing a different frequency. More serene, more alive. I knew the road would be long. But now, with Michael by my side, everything seemed less impossible. Love finally had allies. Now she'll see what we're made of. The next morning, something unexpected happened. Chloe entered the kitchen while I was cutting fruit, and left a small USB drive on the table. She didn't say anything. She just looked at me and whispered, "It's from my backpack. I thought you should see it." I stood still for a few seconds, unsure whether to hug her or just thank her in silence. "Thank you, dear," was all I managed to say. I waited for Michael to arrive so we could analyze it together. Carol brought her laptop with secure reading software. We inserted the device and opened the files. It was like opening a box of secrets. Home videos, audios, travel plans. Brooke and Dominic, clearly visible, talking about the 5-phase escape plan. Miami bank accounts, sale of assets. The words came out like daggers. Brooke described each step with coldness. Emotionally distance the children from the family, claim abandonment, disappear for 3 months, return with a new narrative. Dominic just agreed and mentioned dates. My blood ran cold. Michael was in shock. Carol even experienced white in her eyes. Chloe from the doorway just watched. Shy but firm. She knew she had done the right thing. I closed the laptop carefully, as if sealing a sacred piece of evidence. That USB drive changed everything. It was no longer just my word against Brooks. It was her in her own voice confessing. The tables had turned. I looked at Chloe and said sweetly, "You are very brave." She didn't respond but smiled, a sad yet liberating smile. Did she plan all this? We spent hours listening and analyzing each segment. I noted dates, cross-referenced times with social media posts, school records, bank statements. Everything fit together. Brooke had created a parallel reality, a charade. False accusations, manipulated evidence, emotional alienation. It wasn't just family dysfunction. It was premeditation. And now we had the means to prove it. Michael remained silent for a long time. Then he murmured, "She wants to erase everything we are." And he was right. It wasn't just about me or the children. It was about erasing our roots, our history, transforming everything into ruins, to rebuild it in her image. But she wouldn't succeed. Not now. Not after this. Carol photographed the files, created encrypted copies, and stored them in 3 different places. There would be no loss. Every piece of evidence was sacred. Michael took deep breaths with each new confirmation. The pain still pulsed, but indignation began to overcome it. "She's going to try to retaliate," he said. "Then we need to act first," I replied. The urgency was clear. Time was short, but the truth was now in our hands. For the first time we had everything documented. And we knew Brooke would return. Perhaps sooner than we imagined. Michael stood up, picked up his phone and dialed with trembling hands. "Martinez, we need you. Now. She wants to erase everything we are." At the end of the afternoon we met with Martinez via video conference. The lawyer listened in silence, noted each point, and asked us to organize the files by date and relevance. He said he would initiate the procedures for asset freeze and temporary custody. He affirmed that, with the right evidence, we could not only prevent her escape but also legally protect the children. Michael nodded firmly. "She won't get away with this." Martinez advised caution. "She might still try to manipulate the justice system. But if we remain calm and keep the documentation, we have a real chance." Carol was responsible for organizing the evidence in a legal format. I took care of the emotional memories, the drawings, the notes, the daily records. Leo ran through the living room with a paper airplane, smiling. Chloe read a book on the sofa. Aiden offered to help wash the dishes. Everything seemed surreal. Amidst the chaos, we began to see small gestures of rebuilding. They were reacting, responding to the safe environment. And that, for me, was the most powerful sign that we were on the right path. Martinez ended the call with a phrase that sent shivers down my spine. "Get ready. She's coming back." I looked at Michael. He squeezed my hand. We were ready. Not to fight but to protect. Because now we had proof. And love, it finally had strength. She's coming back and we'll be ready. The doorbell rang with a strange urgency. When I opened it, my stomach churned. Brooke was at the door, alongside a woman in a beige suit with a rigid expression. "I am Patricia Gordon, social worker. We have here an immediate order to remove the children." The tone was authoritative, and Brooke held a victorious smile. The children stopped in the hallway, not understanding. Michael emerged from the kitchen, incredulous. "This is absurd," he shouted, but Patricia interrupted him. "We have documents that point to negligence on the part of Mrs. Helen Walker." Brooke smiled with her arms crossed. I, however, remained calm. "Did you bring a copy of the order?" I asked. She handed over the papers. I put on my glasses, examining every line. Everything seemed official. But I knew the truth. And I was ready to show it. With my eyes fixed on Patricia, I walked to the drawer and pulled out a red folder. "Before any action, I ask that you analyze this evidence." Patricia hesitated. "Here are reports from social worker Lauren Price, complete recordings of the last few days, including the day of the outburst." Brooke paled. Patricia's expression changed as she read the first pages. The children behind me watched in absolute silence. We have images, audios, and even copies of Chloe's social media posts, revealing inconsistencies in what was alleged. Patricia looked at me cautiously. And the recording from day 3. Do you have it? I nodded firmly. I opened the laptop and accessed the file. The silence in the room became an electric field. Where is the recording from day 3? As the video played, Patricia watched attentively. Brooke averted her gaze, crossed her arms, tried to smile as if nothing was serious. But every recorded second dismantled her version of events. The images showed the destruction of the living room, my serene posture, the children's screams, and above all, my complete absence of aggression. It was raw reality, unedited. Patricia took quick notes. And were all these records sent to the previous social worker, Lauren? I nodded. She told me she would open a formal investigation upon the mother's return. Patricia paused for a moment. The tension was palpable. Michael approached and said, "What more do you need to see what's happening?" The woman took a deep breath, as if weighing the impact of the decision. Brooke stepped forward, feigning indignation. "They are manipulating the children against me. This woman has always been controlling. She's faking everything." But Patricia did not seem convinced. I asked for permission and also brought Leo's drawings, the noted routines, the videos of the small moments of affection. I didn't need to shout. The evidence spoke for me. For us. Patricia collected all the documents and said in a low voice, "I need to report this immediately." Brooke tried to protest but was ignored. The social worker headed for the door, but before leaving, she turned and said, "I think we have a bigger problem here." And I knew. This problem had a name and was beside me, about to lose control. "I think we have a bigger problem here." Before Patricia left, I asked for a moment. I went to my bag, took out a USB drive, and connected it to the computer. "There's one more thing," I announced. I put the headphones on Patricia and turned up the volume. It was the recording of Brooke talking to Dominic, detailing the escape plan, the manipulation of the children, and the sale of family assets. Patricia's face changed with each second of audio. This is her own voice," she murmured, still with the headphones on. Michael confirmed. "My daughter Chloe found this USB drive hidden among the toys. She's the one who gave it to us." Patricia removed the headphones carefully, as if holding dynamite. "This material completely changes the scenario." Brooke, who had previously exuded arrogance, now trembled. For the first time, she had no ready answer. The children remained silent, watching everything. Chloe held Leo's hand. Aiden looked at the floor. It was as if they had all been waiting for that moment for a long time. Patricia, with a stern expression, turned to Brooke. "This court order needs to be reevaluated immediately." My heart raced. Not from fear, but from the relief of finally seeing justice begin to act. She left with the documents in hand and promised to return within 48 hours. Brooke stood in the middle of the living room, defeated, trying to understand what had just happened. But it was too late. The show was over. And the curtains were open for all to see. Is this court order valid? 2 days later, Martinez arrived in person. Brooke was summoned for a formal meeting with him, Michael, and me. We were in a conference room borrowed from an allied office. Martinez calmly opened the folder. "Ms. Brooke Simmons, we have 3 legal options here, but I will present the most reasonable one. Relinquish custody and return the diverted assets. Otherwise, you will face charges of parental kidnapping, fraud, and emotional alienation." Brooke tried to laugh. "Do you think you can intimidate me with paper?" Martinez didn't blink. "It's not paper. It's evidence, including audio confessions." He placed the sealed USB drive and the transcript on the table. Brooke paled. She looked at Michael for support, but he didn't avert his gaze. Martinez's legal assistant placed a contract on the table. "Either you sign or jail." She started screaming, accusing everyone of conspiracy. "This is a setup. This old woman always wanted to destroy me." Michael stood up firm. "Stop. For the first time I'm seeing clearly. And I won't let you hurt anyone else." Brooke trembled but maintained her aggressive tone. Martinez remained calm. "The more you resist, the more serious it will be for you. We can take this to the judge. But I guarantee the outcome will be much worse." Dominic, who had been sitting in the back until then, stood up abruptly. "Enough. I'm not going down with you." Brooke turned surprised. So you're going to leave me here alone? He didn't answer. He just left the room, slamming the door. We remained in silence for eternal seconds. Brooke's mask of control finally began to crack. Do you want to lose your children? Or your freedom? She sat down again, visibly shaken. She looked at the papers at the disconnected recorder at me. Her eyes burned with anger and despair. Martinez resumed. If you sign now, you guarantee supervised visits and avoid more serious criminal charges. But custody will go to the father. And the assets must be reimbursed. Brooke didn't answer. Her fingers trembled over the pen. Michael said nothing. He just stared firm. I took a deep breath, ready for whatever came. Then, without warning, Brooke lowered her head and signed. The gesture was silent but resounding. No words. No tears. Just the certainty that for the first time she had lost. And not to me, to the truth. The assistant collected the contract, signed as a witness, and stamped it. Martinez closed the folder. From now on, everything will be judicially registered. We stood up in silence. Brooke remained seated, staring into space. An emptiness built by herself. An abyss she dug with every lie told, with every manipulation cast upon the family that was now freeing itself. We left the room without looking back. Outside, the sun was shining brightly. Chloe, Aiden, and Leo were waiting in the car with Carol. When they saw me, they smiled, still shy. Michael approached his children and hugged them tightly. I allowed myself to smile. We had won the first great battle. But the rebuilding, I knew, was just beginning. So you're going to leave me here alone? In the days that followed, there was no attempt at reversal, no legal maneuver. Brooke had understood that this time there would be no escape. And the children understood too. They were lighter, more present. It wasn't complete happiness. There was still much to heal. But there was something new there: security. Peace. Love with boundaries finally understood. Leo slept more peacefully. Aiden, little by little, started laughing again. Chloe read in silence and began writing a diary. The atmosphere in the house changed. Less tension, more routine. And even if the shadow of the past returned now and then, it was no longer a threat. It was just a memory. And we, together, knew how to deal with it. Michael diligently followed the routine. He was present, participative, attentive. Carol organized the documents to formalize the new custody arrangement. Martinez kept a close eye on everything. And I took care of the garden and the children with the same dedication. But now with something more: relief. Not the end of the battle, but the end of the fear of losing them. On the last night of that week, we had dinner together on the porch. Chloe hugged me without saying anything. Leo dozed off in my lap. Aiden asked me if he could call me Grandma again. I just smiled. And I knew with every fiber of my being that Brooke would never again have the same power over us. And she never tried anything against us again. That clear morning, I sat with the children at the table. I prepared tea for myself, juice for them, and started slowly. You know, a lot has happened. And I know it hurt. It hurt me too. They listened to me in silence. But everything I did was out of love. And love also means saying. Chloe lowered her eyes. Aiden fiddled with the bracelet on his arm, and Leo looked at me sweetly. I continued without dramatizing. When we love, we protect. Even if the other person gets angry. Even if they don't understand at the time. I showed them the notebooks with routine notes, the saved drawings, the exchanged notes. All of this proves that you are too important for me to let you get lost. Chloe looked up, visibly emotional. Leo came to me and snuggled into my lap. Aiden finally spoke. But what if she tries to come back? I took a deep breath. Truth has enormous power. And the truth is now on our side. I saw in their eyes a mixture of relief and fear. It wasn't simple to erase what they had lived through. But now there was space to rebuild. A new bond based on something real, free from the suffocating control that surrounded them before. Michael appeared at the door and heard part of the conversation. He didn't say anything, just sat down with us. We were there for generations of history in silence and love. And I knew that, no matter how difficult the path, we had overcome the worst. Now it was time to teach calmly that loving also means protecting, with words, with choices, with boundaries. The truth always returns. With Carol's and Martinez's support, we finalized the documents. Official custody passed to Michael. The house now had a new structure. Schedules, respect, cooperation. The children helped in the kitchen, took care of their own materials, talked among themselves. There were still difficult moments, tantrums, silences. But there were also laughs. Small but sincere. Michael, increasingly present, learned to listen. He no longer tried to justify Brooke. He just took care of the children like never before. And they noticed. Aiden began to trust. Chloe started opening up to Carol. Leo slept every night holding my crochet handkerchief. The transformation was slow but visible. Pain was being replaced by structure. In the late afternoons we would sit on the porch. Me with my knitting. Michael with a cup of coffee. The children playing in the backyard. Each scene seemed simple, but it carried the weight of everything we had faced. And even with the wound still healing, there was peace. And for the first time there was real hope. One night, Chloe asked me, "Can we be happy now?" I looked at her and smiled. Not only can we already are. It wasn't a perfect ending. It was a true new beginning. And that was enough. Because happiness, I understood, is not the absence of pain. It is the choice to move forward despite it. Can we be happy now? On a sunny Sunday, I sat in the garden with a book in my lap. The children ran across the lawn. Leo pretended to fly. Aiden built a fort with branches. Chloe drew in the new notebook Carol gave her. The gentle breeze rustled the porch curtains. It was as if time, for an instant, had stopped to watch us breathe. Carol appeared with a pitcher of fresh juice. "With ice or without?" she asked with her usual smile. I served the children, who came running. All together, sitting on the grass, in silence and laughter. This was the family I knew existed beneath all that pain. This was the truth that resisted the poison of lies. Michael arrived later, tired from work, but with flowers in his hands. He handed them to me, with a kiss on my forehead. For everything. I didn't need to answer. I just smiled. Because words are not always necessary when peace is genuine. At that moment I felt my heart calm in a way I hadn't felt in years. And then, as in an old and familiar script, the doorbell rang. It was Patricia, with a new judicial envelope. She tried to come back, she announced. But I was ready. Documents up to date, audios, certified copies, everything recorded. Patricia smiled. Even before I could say anything. "Relax, Helen. Everything will be fine." And I knew. Yes, everything would be fine. She tried to come back. But we were already ready. 3 weeks later we received a new summons. Brooke, in another desperate attempt, filed an accusation of mistreatment. But now everything was different. Martinez presented the audio of the conversation with Dominic, and the recording from day 3. Lauren attached her full report. In less than 24 hours, the complaint was dismissed for lack of merit. The judicial response came dry and definitive. There is no evidence of abuse, but rather of effective reconstruction. When I received the news, I was with Chloe picking flowers in the backyard. I read it aloud and she hugged me. "She's not going to stop, is she?" I sighed. "Maybe not. But now we are protected." That was it. She could scream all she wanted. But the truth, that was shielded. The following week, I accepted Carol's invitation to visit the support center for grandparents and legal guardians. Women like me with diverse stories but similar pains. In the first meeting I just listened. In the second I shared. In the third I led. And without realizing it, I became a reference for others who, like me, thought they no longer had strength. A young lady, crying, held my hand at the end of a lecture. "You saved me, Helen. Now I know I can fight too." And there, I saw reflected in her everything I had faced. Injustice, fear, loneliness. But also victory. And I understood at that moment that my story was not just mine. It was a bridge for many others. "You saved me, Helen." The family reorganized. Michael rebalanced work with childcare. The children attended support sessions and did well in school. Carol was a constant presence. Martinez became a family friend. The routine, so mundane for many, was our treasure. Morning coffee, late afternoons with tea and soft music in the background. These were the scenes of our healing. In the spring, I planted new flowers in the garden. Lavenders, daisies, and sunflowers. Chloe helped with the pots. Aiden took care of the hose and Leo, in his apron, watered the flower beds. It was our new tradition, cultivating together. And with each petal that bloomed, I felt that the pain ceased to be a wound and became fertile ground. On the last afternoon of that month, we were all sitting on the lawn. Chloe approached with a colorful envelope. "For you, Grandma," she said, handing it to me. I opened it carefully. It was a drawing made with colored pencils, full of hearts and a phrase in the center. Real family. I couldn't hold back the tears. That paper was more valuable than any court judgment. I closed my eyes for a moment and let the wind touch my face. There they were, running, smiling, belonging. The war had been long, but what bloomed from it was pure, strong, and ours. And deep in my heart I knew it was all worth it. The pain turned into roots and bloomed. Now, I'm curious about you who heard my story. What would you do if you were in my shoes? Have you gone through something similar? Support the channel by subscribing, liking, commenting, and sharing this video. I'm leaving another story on the end screen that you will also enjoy, and it will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.